after 10 years of watching the show Community, I finally watched it from beginning to end. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 6 seasons of Community from the worst to the best.
Cool. Cool.
Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of all 6 seasons of Community. My list is not the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, if you enjoyed this video, I'm planning on doing more Community rankings over the next few weeks. They'll be right up in this playlist right up here. I've got my Office rankings, my Parks and Rec rankings in there as well. To give you a little bit of a point of reference for my experience with the show Community, I first started watching it towards the end of the first season and then continued watching week to week throughout the second season and really enjoyed its creativity and kind of how weird it was.
Streets Ahead is verbal wildfire.
Does it just mean cool, or is it supposed to be like miles ahead?
If you have to ask, your street's behind.
But then in the middle of the third season, kind of life caught up with me and I just fell way far behind on the show, and then I had kids and I just couldn't keep up with it anymore until it dropped on Netflix this spring, and finally I was able to watch it from beginning to end, and I've seen the whole show. And let's get started with the ranking. In last place is season 4. For me, this is when the show started to feel very stale. You still like the characters, it's still amusing, but the actual direction they took things, the character arcs, the stories they went with did not really work for me at all, and they almost all fell flat. A big part of this is that the original showrunner creator departed the show, different people took over, and they tried to capture the magic that just came naturally and organically for him. When you first do something that's kind of risky, crazy, and bold, there's like an energy to it, and if you have success with it, then you're trying to make a formula out of what just was raw creativity originally. And that's what this whole season feels like to me, trying to force what came naturally and organically before. Beyond that, there were some just really bad plot directions. Like they put Troy and Britta in a relationship, which just made absolutely no sense because they don't have that kind of chemistry on screen. Their actual characters on the show aren't compatible in any sense, so it just felt like the writers trying to do something unexpected. And beyond that, the fact that they kind of still had Chang on the show and they did this whole Changnesia plot line, it just strained too much credibility to me. Like, I know the show leans into absurdity quite often and does ridiculous things, but you have to have some rules. There has to be some logic to the way your world works. And so if you have a character actually kidnap people and then he's still allowed at the school because he has his own version of amnesia,
hi, I'm Kevin.
It's just not believable. Likewise, I think this is the season where you really start to feel the limitations of the central premise of the show. There's only so many stories you can tell about people sitting in a library at a community college before you start repeating ideas, coming up with bad ideas, or just stretching the premise too far thin. That's what this felt like to me. In fact, as I was rewatching through the show, the reason it took me 4 months to do it was because as I got to the middle of season 4, I just needed to take a big break. In 5th place is season 6. The final season wasn't the worst season for me, but it was far from the best. They switched from a major network to Yahoo Screen, and just in general, the whole thing kind of looked a little bit different. It felt a little bit different, and you could tell that something had dramatically changed behind the scenes. But probably a bigger problem was the fact that at this point in time, we'd lost about half of the original group of characters in the community group in the library, in which case the central dynamic of the show, how these characters interact with one another, dramatically changed, and it just kind of lost some of its bite. They added a couple new characters into the mix that were okay. It was fun to see Keith David in a comedic role like this, so I kind of got a kick out of him. But the lady that they added didn't add much to the show for me. It was just kind of another authority figure looking at them, and I just didn't care about that too much. The other problem I think that they had was that they didn't know if they were going to get a 7th season or if this was it. And so they didn't really know if they could end things, how to kind of land things. They weren't quite sure what to do with Jeff Winger, whether he wanted to stay at Greendale, wanted to do something else, who to have him end up with. And so you just kind of ended up with a season that was very meta, referencing the fact that they didn't know if the show would continue on afterwards, and just a lot of awkward kisses, inconclusive finales, and awkwardness, but it certainly didn't live up to the heights of previous seasons. There's some strong moments here and there, like the modern espionage episode. They're great with the paintball episodes, and they picked another kind of action genre, the spy genre, to kind of spoof with that one, so I got a kick out of that one. But then you had some real stinkers, like the one that was the product placement episode that we kept telling us about the details of Honda vehicles that just, I know what they were going for, but it did not work. And in general, that's the way I felt about this season. In fourth place is season 5. Dan Harmon returned to the show and gave it a much needed burst of creativity after a very lackluster season 4. Now, it kicked off kind of weird because it felt like they wrote themselves into a bit of a corner with where they ended season 4, making it a series finale if it needed to be, but that means to kick this season off, they had to put everyone in a really depressing place, and Jeff Winger has a failed business.
The Winger Guarantee.
Maybe you should have spent less money on special effects.
So everyone comes back to the school, they kill off Pierce. Kind of starts on a bit of a negative vibe there, but as soon as they got to the episode where they read Pierce's will, it just felt like the old Community again, with the banter between the characters, their dynamics, and Pierce making a series of inappropriate statements to each of them. It felt like the show kind of coming back to life. And then that was followed up with the Floor is Lava episode where Troy kind of left. Just another fun, creative, wacky episode that kind of dove into the psychology of the characters, had a lot of creativity and emotion at the same time that helped you understand how these two characters interact with one another. And then as you kind of went through it, you got more of these genre episodes, another D&D episode, the G.I. Joe episode.
Okay, now remember, don't kill anybody. Just lay down a suppressive fire, like this. Oh, sorry. Oh.
So a bunch of different stuff that felt like the classic era of the show. And when it had those strong episodes, they were kind of right up there with some of the best of the previous seasons. It had its weaker moments at times too. In general, I feel like the cast shakeup actually helped things a lot. With Chevy Chase and Donald Glover leaving, it kind of gave them some new story opportunities that served the show really well for this season. And I enjoyed Jonathan Banks as an addition and had an interesting dynamic with the rest of the cast. So in general, I actually really enjoyed this season. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to share your ranking down below in the comment section. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, I am planning on doing more community rankings over the next few weeks. I'll put them in this playlist right up here. It's also got my office rankings as well as my Parks and Recs rankings. So if you've enjoyed this video, you'll probably love something else in that playlist. In third place is season 3, the biggest and most ambitious season of the show. Takes everything that worked about season 2 and doubles down on it. We've got more genre episodes. We've got more long-running story arcs. We've got more kind of things being teased well in advance. We've got multiple timelines going on.
Just so you know, Jeff, you were now creating 6 different timelines.
Of course I am, Abed.
I love that they went this bananas with this show and went this ambitious, and even kind of the ideas about the school trying to be taken over. There's villains, there's kidnappings. It gets pretty bonkers at certain points in time. And then we get an episode like Chaos Theory where we introduce the idea of multiple timelines that are actually referenced throughout the rest of the show. Love all of that. At the same time, I think this season maybe went a little bit too cynical in some of their ambitions. I don't think they fully lived up to them. So by the time you get to the end of the season and the dean's been kidnapped and there's takeovers, didn't all fully come together for me as well as the previous season did. But that they tried this on a show like this, I think is incredible. And I always love to applaud shows that do things like this because it's so weird that I've got to kind of appreciate it. Our runner-up is season 1. I have always had a soft spot for the first season of this show, as there's a certain simplicity to it, as they hadn't gone full-blown bonkers yet. So it was just about these characters. In a lot of ways, it was about discovering who these characters were for the writers. As if you watch the first few episodes versus the last few episodes of the season, the show and the characters evolve immensely throughout that journey. And I think that there's something enjoyable about watching a show kind of come together like this. It was always funny for me. The characters were always quirky, charming. Pierce was always hilariously offensive and inappropriate. Jeff was always the leader of the group that kind of pulled them together. Very quickly, they discovered that Troy and Abed dynamic that they were so good playing off of one another.
Troy and Abed in the morning, and we're back. Look who's here, Jeff Winger.
You see all of that evolve throughout the season. Granted, that means the season is very uneven. Like, there's a lot of awkward focus on the characters' relationships in this season and how Annie likes Troy based off when they were in high school and he used to be a football player.
You're a football player. It's in your blood. That's racist.
She used to be on drugs. So all these kind of love triangles that I'm glad they dialed back in the later seasons and kind of sorted through some of that a little bit. And some of these characters just took them a bit to figure out what the right thing to do with them was. But I've always had a lot of fun with it and the more simplistic nature of what was kind of going on in the season. And then, of course, as you get towards the end of it and they really discovered their sweet spot with the Modern Warfare episode that is my favorite episode of the show, and they discovered how bananas they could go and found the right tone for it to fit inside of this universe. All of that is something that's very enjoyable for me. And so for me, even though season 1 has its highs and its lows, it starts off so different from where it ends. I really enjoyed this season. But coming in first place is season 2. For me, this is where they discovered their sweet spot and how to balance their many tones and directions they like to take their show. They could have an episode that was about Jeff going back to his law firm, followed immediately by an episode about zombies taking over the school on Halloween.
Holy crap, Leonard's a zombie!
And it worked. They could balance that, and those 2 episodes felt like they fit in the same universe. Both were really funny, but in very different ways. This is also where it just felt like they're on this creative streak of coming up with very clever ideas.
Mission Control, I got a bogey on my 6.
Yeah, I'm on your 6.
Evasive maneuvers.
With kind of incorporating in film genres into episodes and spoofing them in their own way, but also feeling true to this show about a community college. This season is just like back-to-back memorable, iconic episode of the show. To me, this was peak Community. They had the characters figured out. They knew how they fit in the group dynamic, how they should relate to one another. It was ambitious, but not so much so that they couldn't fully pull it off. And so even though it had kind of meta arc running throughout the season, all kind of paying off in the 2 paintball episodes that this season gave us, this one being directed by the Russos, and all of it just kind of made for everything that I love about this show coming together. It was fun, it was funny, it was creative, it was ambitious, and they pulled it off. So season 2 comes in at number 1. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to check out that playlist right over there. In the future, we'll have more community rankings. We got a bunch of Office rankings in there. We got a little bit of Parks and Rec. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much.